How's it going, guys? It's illumignostic, and given that it's Father's Day, I thought I would pop on and offer what I can in the way of advice, I guess. I only have one child, and he's not quite 4, so it's not like I've successfully raised a bunch of kids. Um, so just want to get that out of the way, but. I think I definitely do have some insights, and I'm certainly aware of some of the mistakes that have been made in the past. And we have a lot on the table. We have a lot to think about. We have environmental catastrophes that are happening, and whether you believe in global warming or not is really irrelevant, because I can prove to you that the Amazon rainforest is dying just by going outside with a camera on at night. It takes a second. So, we definitely have some real world problems. We have wars brewing, and then socially, we have an absolute chaostrophe happening. We have the gender dysphoria issue, which is extremely divisive and polarizing. We have so much political unrest. In my opinion, people are losing their minds in mass, basically. There seems to be a sort of collective pathological denial that a lot of people are engaged with, that allows them to cope and sort of avoid the reality that we're all confronting. By the way, you guys, do me a favor and hit the like button. Don't forget to hit the like button, share, subscribe, and if you like my content, please support us through the options in the chat or in the description, because I'm demonetized and I get no help. And so the reality is that if we have landed in a place of chaos and uncertainty and danger and confusion, it is because of the trajectory that we have followed historically. So we have had a badly misguided culture throughout, I would say, modern history. We can see things going awry as far back as ancient Greece. And no civilization ever has been utopian. It's my opinion that the universe, every part of it, is a manifestation of the interplay of opposites. And so there's, never been a perfect time. But I think that our current moment is very reminiscent of the fall of Rome. And you don't have to be a physicist or a Mayan priest to map out the greater and lesser patterns in human history and expect a revolution. Or a repetition, and hopefully a revolution. But, bearing all that in mind, we have to do the best that we can with the moment that we're in and the tools that we have available to us. And so, enter children, it's a cliche, but it's absolutely true that they are our hope, they are our future, and we have to do what we can to heal our lineage, which is quite a burden and quite a task, So I'll tell my own story a little bit, how I ended up as a parent, because it's definitely not something that I did deliberately. I don't necessarily regret it, but it was definitely not deliberate. And for me, it was a major sort of task, because autism runs in my family. I'm at least neurodivergent, if not full-blown or more like Asperger's, I guess. But, my mom was emotionally one-dimensional. I am very flat emotionally. Her father was more autistic than the rest of us. So there's that sort of emotional detachment and just, total and complete lack in socializing, and just a lot of things that would be a concern to someone who's considering becoming a parent and has metacognition and is aware of themselves. And to top it off, my parents were, although not necessarily bad people, they definitely, it's tragic that they're the people that raised me, because I was a very highly intelligent child, very creative, but the damage that was done by those two basket cases, it's only in the last 10 years or so that I'm really able to stand on my own 2 feet and to not sabotage my own life. And you know what I mean? It was a lot of trauma. So I've always been aware that if I was going to have a child, that I would have to ensure that I didn't pass on this violence, that I didn't pass on my father's insecurities, which I, to a large extent, inherited from him, and this is what parents tend to do, and we have cultural maxims while we're on the subject that sort of reinforce this tendency to pass on our issues to our children, and they are all too willing and open-armed in receiving them. It's very difficult to change cultural norms and patterns. This is like the most difficult thing. We have the influence of the Judeo-Christian, that influence to love and respect and honor your father, and unfortunately in the conservative world, this generally translates, in that culture, in that demographic, to emulating your parents, and a lot of people seem to have an instinct that they want to mold their child to have expectations, to transfer their own mortal being into this child in a sort of vain attempt at achieving immortality. At least that's what I understand it to be. And basically, what is required is that we have to re-engineer our entire thinking and our entire culture. And one of the best bits of insight that I can probably offer, and something that I know is absolutely true, is that with every cycle, people are more evolved, and it's my opinion that it happens much more rapidly than even technology. Human consciousness is the most rapidly evolving element of our universe. And, you might say that you don't really feel like these younger generations are necessarily superior to the older ones, but they are in their ability to adapt and to think beyond the sort of constraints of their parents. It's also goes without saying that every individual is a dynamic system. The parents are dynamic systems. Not everyone's the same. So making these sort of general blanket statements, of course, you're going to be able to find fault with them. But in general, I find every generation to be more sophisticated in meaningful ways than the previous generation. The problem is that if there isn't the right kind of guidance and the right kind of influences, that's the qualities, the good qualities of that can easily be negated. And unfortunately, I think there's a lot of effort in doing so right now, coming from the media and the elite, who I think feel extremely threatened by the evolution of mankind. Because the reality is that if people are healthy and they're whole, and they have, healed their lineage, and they have escaped from the trauma of their ancestors, they do not need to be governed. And this is something that is not lost upon the powers that be. And so this is our challenge. The great challenge of our time and our era is to overcome those influences. And it's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing at all. One of the things that I've observed about my own child, and as I said, he's a dynamic system. He's not a carbon clone of everybody else's child, right? But he is extremely independent for a 3-year-old. I guess he's almost 4 now, but he always has been. It hasn't required a lot of discipline. He seems to have his own common sense. He was harvesting plants from the jungle when he was 18 months old, and only picking what he saw us pick. And he never ate anything that he shouldn't eat, like most toddlers. And I can only imagine that there are more and more children that are sort of born in this advanced state, that they need less guidance, that the parent imposing their ideas and their will and their proclivities and all of this on the child is probably less necessary than it's ever been before in human history. And yet people will still do this. So, there's so many things that are just so obvious that people, I think, have all heard, but they don't necessarily seat in the understanding of people to the degree that is necessary in order to really see the benefits of this evolutionary paradigm come to fruition. Of course, having metacognition and developing mindfulness and awareness of your traumas, how they manifest, and being vigilant about correcting that and avoiding transferring them to the child. I mean, this all kind of goes without saying, but the reality is that people are going to have a really hard time with this. What I see when I look around in the world is a lot of confirmation bias, a lot of denial, a lot of selective perception, and all of those things will result in a fundamentally flawed influence on the children. And what is important beyond anything else, except for, of course, just general love and support, is the parent's ability to walk in the light of abject truth, that they have the courage and the facility to be objective in their reasoning, in their political disposition, in their spiritual life. Speaking of the spiritual life, I think this is probably one of the biggest concerns and worries that I have about the current batch of children, is that there's such an insanely, I guess gotta turn this light off. How would you say misinformation and truth tends to be mixed up and garbled in just about every demographic that I'm aware of, to an extent that is downright frightening. And if you follow my channel, you know that I believe that that's very much deliberate. But it really poses a lot of threats to small children. And, even though I have a YouTube channel where I talk a lot about consciousness and ayahuasca and even magic and UFOs on occasion, I have generally a very anti-woo disposition. And one of the most important things that developmentally is required for a child to find the right trajectory earlier is the ability to think critically, and to, not to the degree that their creativity is stifled, but the ability to think critically and certainly not to have their perception influenced in a way that occults the truth from them and impedes their ability to make, reliable interpretations of objective reality. And I see a lot of things when I go out and about that are pretty worrisome in that regard. And, of course, the upside of being alive in this time, except, AI, I don't know how to feel about that exactly. It's almost difficult to speak about anything because we know that the evolutionary paradigm has an accelerant being poured on it that most of us can't even begin to predict all of the ramifications and the impact Something like AI, people have been worried about content creators and, you know, programmers and just, those type of people that can obviously be replaced, clerks, desk workers, in sky rises, and one computer can do the work of, one AI program can do the work of several skyscrapers full of people. And but I think it's not as common for people to realize that the CEOs are done too. This isn't just going to affect the middle class and the lower class. This is all across the board, all the way to the top of the pyramid, a complete and total restructuring of society. And the fact that we heard so little about it as we approached this moment where these things are actually sort of engaged in the culture and in the society. Yeah, so you know what I mean? It's more difficult to prepare for the future and to make predictions about what that is going to look like than it's ever been before in human history. But what I was actually going to say is that despite that fact, assuming that we can find the impetus and the discipline and the willpower and the motivation and the drive and the wisdom to avail ourselves of all of the tools and opportunities that are presented by this change, this opportunity-bearing crisis that we find ourselves in. A new order requires chaos to emerge. And so having that attitude, if we just make certain assumptions based on aligning with positive influences and positive potentials and opportunity, then we might start thinking that we have a greater ability to research. We have greater access to information. We have AI that can distill that information by relevance for us if we learn to use prompts correctly. We have ayahuasca, LSD, all of these different types of psychedelic medicine that can be used to address pretty much every psychological aberration known to man. And we can take our fates into our own hands in a way that has never been available to people before. And if there is a best case scenario with AI, we may find ourselves with a whole lot more time to be creative and to pursue higher knowledge. And with great freedom comes great responsibility. And so what I'm trying to get at here is that my tact and my approach with my son is to make the assumptions, for the most part, that we are going to turn these things to our advantage and to prepare for a world that has that predisposition to make the most of the tools that we have access to and the opportunities. And we do need greater metacognition. We do need greater awareness. We are 98% automatic, according to some estimates. 88% is the low side estimate, right? But we have compounds like psilocybin that allow us to create a bridge between these two hemispheres of the brain and to increase communication to unprecedented levels. And therefore, we can very easily neutralize the influence of history. We can neutralize the influence of Auschwitz on our grandparents or great-grandparents. We can neutralize the influence of our abusive father, and we can reprogram his insecurities right out of our being. Our, narcissist, lunatic mother, we can, you know what I mean? We can heal all of that stuff. We can use ayahuasca to expose the emotional trauma that we were unable to look at. And what we need most of all is to take a stock of our entire, ontology and reevaluate and figure out, okay, we are in seriously the wrong place at this moment. What exactly can we do? What are the major things that need to be overhauled in order to create a new trajectory? And there are certain attitudes that bubble up immediately that I feel like we're already making some progress on. One of those is the idea that people that are spiritually advanced, for example, should not expect money for their services, and that if they do, that it should be very cheap. And we are sort of entering into a new phase where people understand that until the entire system until there's a completely different operating system, the people that pursue self-awareness and mindfulness and compassion and empathy, if they're all broke, they have no power and no influence. So, there are just certain cultural assumptions that need renovation, and we have no excuses at this point. That's really the greatest thing. We have no excuses. We have access to the information. We have access to psychedelic medicine. And we have access to technology, and we don't really need anything else. It's just a matter of how you apply the tools and what you're going to allow your relationship to all of these things to be. So, honestly, I think that's all I have to say about that. It's pretty nerve-wracking, I'll admit. And in my own situation, I did not intend to become a father ever. I did not want to bring children into the world because I feel like we are overpopulated. And I realize a lot of people say, oh, well, we could have all this land. We have room for all these people. That's one of the responses to overpopulation that I've heard. And then people talk about going green and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, I literally have watched the species in the Amazon rainforest disappear, by 70% of the insects or something in the last 3 months. And you think we're going to overhaul the entire planet and turn it around in brief enough time? Like, I'm sorry, I just, don't really, it's hard to imagine that kind of solution without some major population reduction, and don't worry, this is going somewhere. I never imagined that I would have a family. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to devote my attention, my time to my own pursuit of consciousness and music, and I did not want anything influencing my freedom or my behavior ever. And then Enrica got pregnant, and we're in South America, in a country where abortion is illegal. I do know plants that could pretty safely take care of that, especially early on. But at the time, we actually had a monetized YouTube channel. To put it in perspective, when I had 2,000 subscribers, I was making twice as much money from the YouTube channel as I do now at 8,200. And it was only growing. I had not been demonetized yet. We had a business making and sending rape all over the world. When we first arrived here, I also had a Shopify store. I think that was gone at that point. And I was doing, ceremonies here and there. So we had plenty of income. I wasn't really worried about anything. And Nagwal was born right before COVID. And when that happened, we lost the post office here, which meant that our rape business was gone. I got demonetized for speaking out about Kamala Harris on YouTube. So that income and also the growth of the channel was slashed to pieces. Ceremonies stopped for, it was really bad. And I guess I'm partly mentioning that because had I known that all of that was coming and the trajectory of the world at the time, I don't know that I wouldn't have voted for some kind of plant remedy to pregnancy. I mean, I'm glad I didn't. We love Nagwal, of course, but it's like it does feel like that decision was made in a completely different world. But on the flip side, I think that we were right that if you don't have some serious problem. If you're not a derelict junkie or homeless, or just really dumb and aware of it, or you just can't take care of the child no matter what. I for me, I don't think that I agree with terminating a pregnancy. uh I support people's right to choose, but new DNA strand at the moment of conception. So, I mean, it's not really an arguable thing at this point with that bit of information. Um, but then again, it has given me, I think, the motivation and determination to overcome adverse circumstances over and over and over again. Because every time we lost a business or something was taken away from us because of COVID, it's like I would trip, fall, roll, and land on my feet and with a new idea, and it would actually work, at least long enough to get us to the next idea. And I don't know that I would have been quite as effective without that influence. So grateful for Nagwal, although I'm just trying to be honest. I'm trying to be positive, but I also feel an obligation to honesty. And the degree of uncertainty in the world right now is, it almost causes me guilt, because I think I'm more inclined to think that we've probably lost the plot irrevocably. And so for that, I think, it was a really cruel thing. When on those days where I'm feeling that way, I feel like it was a really cruel thing to bring a child into the world. But on those days when I think, well, maybe we can get enough psychedelic medicine into enough people under the right circumstances with the right guidance, and then we can avail ourselves of the technology that we have at our disposals to create a better world than we have ever seen before. And it's always darkest before the dawn. So, and also, I've never seen anything like Nagwal in terms of the level of intellectual sophistication for a 3-year-old. It's pretty wild. Kids are marvelous things. He figures stuff out that I just don't understand how he could have any reference for. For example, tonight we're going to drink ayahuasca, Mom and I, and we were discussing it in front of him, and he said, well, I want to drink it too, but I just want a little sip. And I was just blown away, because the implication is that he understood dosage somehow. It just doesn't, no one has had that conversation with him. He doesn't have any experience with any of this stuff. Where the hell did that come from? And just lots of really, really crazy things that the kids intuit and understand, that I have trouble imagining previous generations having this capacity at such a young age. And it's not woo. It's not like the indigo children are being born. We have to remember that in our DNA, we have the cumulative influence of thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years of ancestors. Really more than that, because it's all there. It's all there. And so the influence may not have the same intensity when it is bearing down on you from 500 years in the past, but it's there. And you could think of it as momentum. The more ancestral, I don't want to say baggage, but we have that. We have baggage, and then we have whatever the opposite of baggage is. You know what I mean? From all of those ancestors. And that manifests if it's unobstructed in the children. We just have to forget about the old paradigm. You don't impose your will and your beliefs and your ideas on your children. It just reminded me a lot, like a lot of the things that I've had to check. You have to catch yourself emulating the older generations, because they told us to respect your mother and father and to honor them, and you have a sort of feeling of moral obligation that if you actually recognize all of the negative influences and the damage and how wrong your parents actually were, you're doing something wrong. And this actually prevents the entire culture from being renovated and overhauled, because people are unwittingly, with the best intentions, road to hell, paved with best and good intentions, they have this obligation to these generations that really we need to be able to look at that influence objectively and restructure the future based on that knowledge. Like my son was ignoring me the other day, and it hit me that if I was my father's generation, what I would do is say, get like angry, like don't ignore me, boy, kind of thing, because you want to demand respect. The child has to respect the man, you know what I mean? And that's not how that's done. It's not. You're not acting like a man. You're not demanding respect. You're just using fear, and you're being an asshat. You know what I mean? We have to go through these things piece by piece and find every bit of it that is not beneficial and delete it. Delete. And the reality is, of course, love your parents, cherish them, respect them, whatever. I realize all parents weren't as bad as mine were. But you have to realize that in healing the trauma that they passed on to you, or even if it's not, trauma necessarily, but just misperception, misguided ideas, whatever it is, indoctrination of all kinds, you are actually honoring them more by fixing it and recognizing it and healing it than you would be by propagating it with future generations. Because they would have been better off if somebody had done that before their line. And if you are able to excise those things from your being, then, you have healed them retrospectively, and they would be proud of you. Even in those cases where if they're aware of it, you make some kind of change, your parents are wrong about something, but you stand up to them, you stand up to their influence, and you do something they don't like, doesn't mean they're right. Does not mean they're right. So we have to take responsibility for our own evolution and then completely reimagine the role of parent. Because, if our society has gone that wrong, that is the number one influence on the people that drove it off the tracks. And so that's where we have to look in order to find the answers and the solutions. All right, guys, I'm actually going to do another stream because I just am making a lot of content and doing a lot of streams. So, I think I got my point across, and I don't want to just, there's no point in beating a dead horse. But it's just so important that we have the courage to really be objective and to confront the truth in the universe, and that is something that I think is like the greatest, most ubiquitous difficulty that people confront. And it's related, truth is kind of the opposite of the unknown, right? Or it's a resolution of the unknown. But it's interesting that this inability to confront truth on its own terms in ourselves and in the world at large sort of reverse mirrors the greatest fear of humanity, which is the unknown. So the formula of integrating these things with courage and love and that's all, with courage and love. That's it. So I hope this was helpful. I know most of my audience is half my age and might have kids on the way or kids coming. in the future that they don't think they're going to have. I know a lot of you guys, I talk to a lot of people in my community and they're like, I'm not having kids. And that's what I said too. So, I mean, you might as well prepare yourself just in case because you really never know what's going to happen. So happy Father's Day to all of you in the future or in the present, and best of luck to everyone. Thank you for watching. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon, and you can also support us by making a contribution to the addresses in the chat. And we do have space open for our July retreats and our November retreats, and there are potentially discounts and deals available, so it may be more affordable than you would think. And also, I am booking for my flow state coaching, mentoring, and I do have a testimonial on the channel that you can check out. There will be more of those coming along. Everyone benefits tremendously from it. So I have great confidence that I'm offering something of value. So if you feel like you need some guidance, I'll do my best for you. And so far, it's worked very well for people. So thanks a lot one more time, and I'll see you guys in like 20 minutes if you want to come to the jam session and AMA that I'm going to do for a couple hours until we go and drink ayahuasca.